Peace, family. How you doing on this Wednesday evening? I'm so psyched up. Tonight we're going to talk about the power of the vote. We're going to go over Sacramento Sister Circle and BWAPA's voter guide. I'm joined with Christy and Sister
Kula.
I gotta remember that. Sister Kula, Sister Christy, okay? And these two sisters. So tell me real quick before we get into the voter guide, tell me about Sacramento Sister Circle, how that formed, and BWAPA. You remember both?
Let's do BWAPA first.
Good.
I'll be on here all the time.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
This is your first time.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. So BWAPA is Black Women Organized for Political Action, and we are the Sacramento chapter, but we're actually founded in Oakland, and so we have a series of chapters in the Bay Area, some in the Central Valley, but really Black Women Organized for Political Action was started to ensure that Black women are in places to influence policy, basically, in places of power. So whether it's being elected, whether it's being on a board or a commission, but then also at the same time being able to provide information on policies and what's happening so that those who are elected can be fighting for the issues that are important for us, right? So that's kind of the mission and the goal, right? But you know, here in Sacramento, the chapter has been around for a while, and then I think it was kind of dormant. And a group of us started it back up in March of last year, actually.
Right.
And so we just kind of started. Yeah, it's been a year. Yeah. So started it back up, and really, we meet the first Fridays of every month. At the Efren Willem Family Life Center, 6 to 7:30, first Fridays of every month, at BWAPA SAC on Facebook. And really, we've been doing training on politics. We've really been trying to, thinking about what's happening with housing at the same time, educating people on what's going on there, educating people on the money bill system, on the issues that are really affecting our communities. And that's really our charge moving forward after this crazy political season. We want to do even more trainings on how to run for office 101. We did that. It was really successful, and we want to keep doing that. So that's really our charge, get people involved in politics, get people elected and places of influence. Okay. It's our time.
It sure is our time.
Yes.
What about you, Christy?
So the Sacramento Sister Circle is a network of Black women over the age of 18 that come together once a month to talk about our 5 pillars. And our 5 pillars are the study of Black women, dismantling stereotypes, mentoring younger women and girls. We have a college bound luncheon coming up next month. We also have fun, so expanding our horizons, doing fun things together, sisterhood, just like fun, like laughing, river rafting, things like that.
That was fun.
Yes. We held up the boat.
Yes. I didn't know where I was coming from.
We was like, come on, Kula.
No, I was coming from church. It was on Sunday, and I'm running from church from North Highlands, and I was like,
we held it up.
They waited for me. Thank you.
We go river rafting and do fun things like that. But we also are really focused on being financially aware and independent, and also being politically active. So that's where this voter guide comes in, is making sure that Black women are involved on a political level, and particularly on a local level of what's going on in our politics.
Okay, so before we get into this voter guide, this sister from Georgia last night.
Yay!
Oh,
Stacey
So
Abrams.
what was your thoughts? What was your immediate thoughts? You came across the Facebook, so
I lived in Georgia. I know very well about Georgia. So this was like a huge victory, and someone had to remind me, because I'm already thinking about the primary in November, because that's where the real fight is going to be, right? But it's just awesome to see a Black woman. She identifies with the LGBTQ community. She was in the legislature before. So it's really good to see the support behind her. And I was so excited to see all the people put with their I voted stickers. And I'm just really excited for the moment and the time. I actually work with an organization called Women Engaged in Georgia, where they do a lot of the GOTV, and they register folks to vote. And this is monumentous, right? It's great, but this is really going to be a fight. This has been a historically red state. They have some of the most offensive, disrespectful, oppressive elected officials in the country. So this is going to be an interesting fight, but I'm really excited about this moment. We should definitely celebrate this victory, but we definitely should figure out how we can support her leadership from afar, because she's going to need it.
Right.
So, with that being said, say if this sister does become governor, what can we do to ensure her success or her achievements? Because sometimes we put people in power,
Right.
and then we just kind of be like, yay, and then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And we know there's more work when the
Yeah,
person is
definitely.
elected. That's when the work really begins. I mean, what can we do more before we jump into this guide when we put people in
Right.
places? How do we help them to meet or to meet their commitments?
Right. I mean,
And
I think
support
it's
them.
important. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously she's in Georgia, but just in general, when people get elected, I think it's important to show up so they see that you're there and so engaged. So whether it's at council meetings or setting up meetings with them to hold their feet to the fire at the same time on one hand, but then on one hand also provide them with support as they're doing good things. Let them know that you see it, you appreciate it, and that there's other people in the community who see and appreciate it. When there's things that they could work on, let them know that you that you see that as well, and kind of provide that nudge of where they should go. Because I think that after they get elected, if they don't see you, then they think, okay, I think everything's good here. But if they see that you're still watching, and that'll be for now, like the candidates that we've even endorsed.
Right.
Some of them, not everybody's happy about them, but it's like, okay, once you get in office, then we're still going to be there, to make sure that the things that you promised us to in this time, that you hold true to them.
Yes.
Okay, so what made y'all come together to create this voters guide?
So the Sacramento Sister Circle has been doing the voter guide. This is our 7th one. So it was important to partner with BWAPA because they did a lot of legwork. So they've been interviewing candidates. They had a list of recommendations that they came up with. Some of them we agreed with, and we had a little, little differences, but we were really excited to partner with BWAPA. I've been familiar with BWAPA for a long time. Actually was a member during that dormant time.
Right.
And so it was just like partnership and collaboration, and it makes no sense for us to be just doing it on our own. We wanted to show the span and the breadth of Black women leadership here in Sacramento, and so it was a no-brainer. We were like, come on, let's do this.
Right. And so as a Sacramento chapter, our charge is Sacramento County electeds, right? And so we issued our political chairs, we got together, put together a questionnaire, sent it out to all the folks who were running, the ones who answered our questionnaire, and our questionnaire was around, how are African American values reflected in your campaigns? We asked about the school to prison pipeline. We asked about the achievement gap. We asked about, social justice, cash bill, like all those things in our questionnaire. And then after that, we actually scheduled interviews with those candidates from Sacramento County.
So what was your response? Did people respond?
So I would say, and I don't remember the exact number, Cecile would know, but we had, I think maybe about over half of the candidates responded and filled out our questionnaire. And then, so then we had the interviews, and then we had recommendations based on the interviews, but then our general membership got together at our meeting, and actually we had voting paddles, we had discussions, and then we kind of talked through, who we wanted to endorse, and then we put out, that list. So in the voter guide, the local ones are the ones that we really actually went through and spoke with.
So on this first national, we're going to look at some things nationally, California elected, statewide propositions, county electorate. We're going to look at the board members for Twin Rivers, for the county board of supervisors, the DA, the sheriff, and a lot of things in between. But those are the ones that really stuck out. We're just going to go move on through this guide.
Yeah, let's move to the guide.
Woo, your first one on the top of the list.
Can we say where the guide is? So if you want to go,
please.
so if you go to the Sacramento Sister Circle, and this slash right here,
vote. That's the back slash, the front slash, and everything.
You can actually get our voter guide. It's open to everyone, and again, Black women took the lead in putting out this list of recommendations, and that's what they are, recommendations, with a lot of great information because there was a lot of research and time and energy that was put into it. But this is open for everybody. And we'd love to have discussions more, like, one of the candidates for, oh my God, who was it? His name was Kevin Mason. And he said he met with you guys. It was, oh my goodness, I don't remember. He kind of like, was like, this is a bad recommendation, and he was one of the candidates, and I'll think about it in a minute. And I think that was another one.
Because I was like,
this is another one.
Okay.
He sent this on our rightful page, our rightful place page, and he was just like, that was a bad choice, and he's like, sorry, we don't have any money to give to y'all. We met with Bawapa, and I said, excuse me, first of all, we don't get any money.
We don't take money. Like this is like.
I was like, in the Sacramento Sister Circle is a nonprofit organization, so we don't have anything to gain from recommending.
Neither do we. We don't get money.
Right. We don't have anything to gain by recommending the folks, but we're trying to make an informed decision and help those that want to make informed decisions that maybe don't have the time to go through all of the different people and their records, to give them an opportunity to know who to vote for based on our recommendations. So that was really interesting. I was just like, don't come for me. I'm not the one.
No, she's definitely not. She's not the one.
Me.
Well, I'm sharing the link on in the comments. So I'll do that throughout, the whole process. So with that being said, the national electorate you guys had for the U.S. Senator. Mm-hmm. What is the U.S. Senator's job, just in the national? What does that person do?
So obviously the U.S. Senate, you have the House of Representatives, Congress, and you have Senate. And obviously because the Senate is a lot smaller, people call it, it's the House where kind of a lot of discussion happens where things get done, right? So our U.S. Senator is looking at everything around budget, which is really big, around policies around healthcare, the healthcare bills that are passing, like all of those things, those big policy decisions that they're getting to weigh in on, right? And at the federal level, with California being such a big state, then we know kind of how that rolls down here with us to impact how much funding our state gets, especially when you think about things like Medi-Cal and what we the Affordable Care Act, all of that stuff. And so it's important for our senators to be people who will fight for us.
Okay. All right, so with that being said, we just got joined by Dr. Flo. We're so happy you're here. You know how we do. We just
you made it. You always got to send the people out looking for us.
Well, I'm worried.
That's all right.
She's not used to starting.
So we just starting to go down the guide.
I'm late, so I was like, okay, well, let me get some food real quick. I'll let this event for free.
Here you go.
Yeah, you gonna plug that up for
Are we?
There's a plug. If you go around this way here, there's a plug. You know what the plugs are, Chrissy?
Are we supposed to re-live or join the live? So
you can share it on your page. We literally just got started. We're on the first one, so we're just on the first one.
Do I need to go live and?
We live already, so we already live. So
I know, but do I need to join?
No, just go to my page and then share it here on my page.
Okay.
Yeah, share it from my page. Sure. So the first one we're in is that we're gonna go right on to.
Okay.
You guys selected Kevin DeLeon.
Mm-hmm.
Why Kevin DeLeon?
Right.
Can I say something? Please.
Okay.
So this is a coveted seat, and definitely the more politically astute can talk about it. But Dianne Feinstein has been in this position for a very long time, and she's known as someone that has been an ally, I think, to women and black people. But I also don't think we know about some of the darker sides of Dianne Feinstein. And so she's like one of the ones that kind of started this whole mass incarceration thing. Like, she actually was instrumental in starting this whole mass incarceration, especially in the state of California, of like, we need to lock people away and kind of like throw away the key.
Wow.
And so a lot of people don't attribute that to her.
Back when she was mayor of San Francisco.
Right, doesn't attribute that to her because they wanted to make sure, white women were safe to walk around, in my opinion. This is my opinion, okay?
No, that's what we got to talk about. This is
and
part
so
of this conversation.
I really, she's been thought of like very highly, but in my opinion, her, kind of background is not necessarily talked about in regards to her being like more sometimes in the middle to conservative on some issues, especially around mass incarceration. So for me, for somebody that's been in politics for such a long time, it's I think actually a time for us to start bringing up that record. We know there's a long-standing record of her, and even though it is perceived that she is an ally, I think that people need to look more in depth of her record, and some of her things that she has done has not been favorable to us as black people.
So I think that's worth noting. More than worth noting, because we know we're dealing with mass incarceration, the effects of it now. Some 20 years, 25 years before you ladies came, I was listening to some documentaries from the East Coast around that whole thing that happened in the 90s all over the country. Mm-hmm. So it's that, and we're still feeling that effect today. So it's nice to try to get this.
And she was at the forefront of that, because the rest of the country kind of followed suit.
Right.
Yeah. California, and it's one of the biggest industries here.
Yep.
So why, besides that major point, why else would you want to endorse? Why y'all endorse Kevin Davion?
So I do want to make some clarifications that Sister Circle and BWAPA have not endorsed all of the candidates that are listed here. Sister Circle only makes recommendations, so we don't do any endorsements whatsoever. BWAPA does have a list of endorsements, but this particular seat is not on that.
And remember I said the Sacramento County, so that's within our purview as the Sacramento chapter, and so those local ones are the ones that we actually interviewed and formally endorsed. These are recommendations based on research that just we've done on records and such.
Okay. So obviously, when you're holding a higher office, there are compromises that you make all the time in order to be able to win. You need people to vote for your bills, so you have to vote for some of theirs. And so we recognize that those compromises take place all the time. But there are some people who are a lot more principled in their compromises than others, and that champion issues that we think are really important. And Kevin DeLeon has shown that within California. He has been one of the champions of universal health care. He frequently talks about, he brings a perspective to the table in terms of having grown up with a mother who was a domestic worker, who did not have a whole lot of money when he was growing up, and he really brings that perspective to a lot of the bills that he introduces. They're around providing stopgaps for people who don't have. And I think often when it comes to what bills we compromise on, the bills that we often see legislators compromise on are the ones where there's not a lobbyist there who's going to be talking about, in your ear fighting for this thing. The one where you usually get the compromises that are unfortunately not about our values are usually things that are that benefit corporations. And so where somebody's in your ear. And so I've seen him time and time again take stances on things where there really aren't going to be a whole lot of people who are high-powered and in $1,000 suits knocking down his door about those issues. And I think that's an important thing to know going in. Like, Dianne Feinstein was a woman in the Senate at a time when there weren't a lot. And so she is known for being moderate on a lot of things. She's also known for getting a lot of her bills passed because she was moderate and she made concessions. So I totally understand that, being entirely, ideological means not sometimes being entirely pragmatic, and that's a difficult thing to do when you're in a system.
It's a different thing from being in
California,
working in California versus working in DC.
There, right? And so you do have those decisions, and so I don't want to take anything away from that, while also totally echoing what Christy said about some of those concessions came on the backs of Black and brown people. Yes. And so what I see is him taking stances where Black and brown people stand to benefit, and making concessions in other areas certainly. And his record is not squeaky clean, as almost no one's is who's been in office long enough. But his concessions, I think, have been far less on the backs of poor and, the disadvantaged communities.
All right, okay. So the second one was the U.S. State Representative, District 2, John Garamendi. Why did y'all make a recommendation for him?
So, a lot of times we kind of look and see who's in the field as well. And so for this one, he's running against another Democrat, and that Democrat, as Christy has kind of talked about in terms of what's going on with the mass incarceration and our criminalization of folks. He worked for CDCR, which is not entirely disqualifying.
What is CDCR?
That is the California Department of Correction and Rehabilitation. And so he worked for them and was really sort of instrumental in working with some of their healthcare facilities. And he brags about his 100+ prison construction projects. And while certainly we believe in the constitutional right that all people who are incarcerated should have access to health care, it is troubling that that's something that he's proud of in terms of the infrastructure, because he was a part of this while there was a huge boom in the number of prisons that we had.
And you're talking about Kevin Pruitt, right?
Yes, I'm talking about Kevin Pruitt. So this is his Democratic opponent. And this was happening, at the time when we weren't building more UCs. We weren't building some of the structures that we should have done.
One in 20 years.
Right, exactly.
There's been one community college in 20 years.
Yep. So that was a big knock on his opponent in terms of trying to figure out who we were going to recommend. We try our best not to make no recommendations for an office because you have to vote,
Right.
and no recommendations sort of by default either benefit the incumbent or benefit the front runner. So we try not to make no recommendations. And so for this one, we felt like there were some things about John Garamendi that also warranted. He has been strong on access to affordable health care, which is a big one because we know that's part of, when we think about especially Black women and we think about poverty, part of what drives us into poverty is housing and healthcare.
Right.
And so if we don't have access to those, we're in trouble. And I would say the other one for women of reproductive age would be lack of access to family leave and childcare responsibilities. And so if you take those three, that's sort of the trifecta of economic peril. And so
Particularly for
Black women. And so if we think about those three, and for many communities as well. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you do well by Black women, you're likely to do well
That's
by a
what
whole lot of
Angela
others.
Glover Blackwell said. She said we're the canary in the coal mine, really, in terms of the needs that happen. And so if you do well for us,
everybody else is likely to benefit as well.
Exactly.
So he's also been really good on environmental concerns, which I know doesn't always reach the level of interest for us because we're often worried about some of the day-to-day basics, the housing, the healthcare, etc. But we are also the ones who reap our health is impacted by what happens in the environment. When we're not good stewards of that, we're the ones who feel, again, the canary in the coal mine. We're the first ones.
And if you live in environments where you can't go out and actually be active, you can't afford a gym membership, but can you go out? Do you feel safe enough to be out with your families to be active? And if you don't live in an environment where you can do that, it's affecting your health also.
And so that's really important. And then sort of lastly, he also has been big on American manufacturing, and we know that part of what has been a real challenge in the U.S. is that a lot of the manufacturing jobs have been shipped overseas because it's cheaper. But there also are huge labor issues around making things in other countries and paying people not just less than you'd have to pay here, but slave wages. And so he's been really big on trying to protect American manufacturing and doing a lot to be able to champion that. And so again, those are things that certainly benefit our communities a great deal, and so we think is really important. And so that's part of the reason why he got the recommendation.
Okay, so we're still on the U.S. representatives. So District 6, so he was for District 3. District 6 would be Doris Matsui, was your recommendation.
Right, and that's Sacramento. Congresswoman Doris Matsui has been around for a long time. She's someone, I love that she's so accessible. I love that, that she shows up. She's also very progressive, responsive to the needs of the community. One of the things that we talked about, it was the big floods in Natomas and what was happening there. People couldn't, buying homes, homeowner insurance, all of those things were in jeopardy, and it was tough, but she really pushed through to make sure that people living in Natomas would have been safe as well. And the healthcare, she's been big on that as well, and just a fighter for those issues that really, matter to us. So, she's someone that, I personally respect and know, her work as well. And so
I think a lot of us see her as an ally.
Yeah.
I know that she's done a lot for our community and other communities and represented as well. So I think that's like a no-brainer right there.
So she's like an incumbent, right?
Yeah, she's incumbent. She's been there 13 years.
But she's been there. I like that, even though she's been there for a long time. I feel like she still doesn't take us for granted.
Yeah.
Like she still comes. Her staff is still, proactive. You want to meet with them. She's there. She's a different community event.
To ask her to vote, and so I think that's really important in terms of having people who are going to champion the issues that we want in Congress, and also take hardline stances against things that we don't want. We also want a clean DACA. We want there's some other things that we want to have happen there that she takes really hardline stances on and makes sure that there aren't all these extra things thrown into a bill that could hurt communities when the initial intent of the bill was something entirely different.
Okay, District 7. What's this?
Ami Bear.
Ami Bear.
Yes.
I would say that because one word. That's what I'm like. So, but he's an incumbent as well.
He is an incumbent.
So why did you recommend that we vote for him again?
So he comes with some considerations, and the reason that I say that is because obviously, Dr. Barrett is a champion of healthcare and things like that we really care about. His is a really important seat to maintain. I want to just take a global picture really quickly and say, California sends a lot of more Republicans to the House than we should, especially given that some of the districts we send Republicans when they're not even the majority in that district. And so, that's a big plug for those of you you who are qualified and considering to run. But it's also just an idea that we want to make sure that when it comes to being able to have a good voting block in the House, even though we're underrepresented, which is a whole other conversation, for the representation
we'll be
we do
changing
have.
that.
Right,
Yes.
right.
So we're going to change that.
But even though we're underrepresented in general, especially in California, because we don't get even distribution, but we should be sending more progressive people to the House to be able to help sway the tenor of that conversation. And so this is an important seat to maintain for that reason, which is why he's recommended. But the considerations are that there have been times where his record has not been as progressive as we would have liked, and where there were other people like Doris Matsui who very easily took stronger stances. Now, we recognize that he's from a split district, and so that also means that he has a lot of people calling him up and saying, I'm concerned about this, that, and the other, and he has to try to get enough of those votes so that he can stay in office. But the challenge then also becomes, if you're not going to represent us well while you're there, should you
be there?
And so that's why he's recommended with considerations. We've linked to one of the articles in the guide about just some of those considerations that have come up over time. But in particular, supporting the Syrian refugees. He was not great on that when he could have been. When we have to think about, though, that compared to some of his opponents, obviously he rises to the top. Right. And so, again, don't want to make a no recommendation unless we have to. And we've done it, but we don't like it.
And his seat is constantly being
he's
contested.
Like margins.
Yeah, and they have to, count the votes.
Yeah, exactly, type
So
votes.
this is a very important seat, and so it's very important for a Democrat, for me, in my opinion, to hold this seat. And so we might need to work on him a little bit better, but definitely he is better than the opponents.
And that's where it comes up when you were saying when someone is elected, what then, right?
Yeah.
So then, if we're constantly there letting him know that we're watching, that we're, kind of, we've got your back if you do this as well, then maybe those other voices aren't so loud in your ear as well. So it's kind of that balance.
And we have to be reminded that even when we agree with someone, that's why I send Doris Matsui the thank you so much for voting, because even when we agree with someone, we want to make sure that they still hear our voice and know that we're paying attention.
Yes.
And not that that's necessarily an incentive, but in a split district when you're constantly hearing from the opposition, I think many of us have been more politically and I think many of us have been more politically active, on the national scale since Trump was elected, right? And have been calling our members and doing all these things. Why? Because we feel like we're in a fight. Well, we should have been doing that during the 8 years of the Obama administration as well.
That's what we were talking about, right?
They got that. That's
earlier,
good. Yeah. We need to call in, and so this is important that we let the people who we've elected, who we agree with, know our feelings as well, so that they recognize they have a referendum and they don't feel like they're going to lose some support by voting in the way we want them to.
Well, I also want to just say too, I feel like particularly locally Black women are organizing in a totally different way. And so we talked about this earlier. So while we made the recommendations, there was some endorsements by BWAPA, we can now engage differently now. We can really, I feel like we have, for me, in regards to the Sacramento Sister Circle, when it first started, almost 7 years ago, a lot of folks were not interested in being politically involved. They didn't understand how the government works. They were voting for pretty much major elections. But in regards to these June elections, and that's one of the reasons why we did the voter guide, is because historically voting is low during that time, but historically African Americans and Black folks voting during that time is very low as well. And so I feel like we are just now at a place where people are really engaged on a local political level, but then also just the overall understanding of the political process. And I think it is unfortunate that we had to wait till Trump gets into office for us to think about it in that. But it is really a life or death situation at this point. And so I definitely, and then our young people are looking at us they're what is happening right now? Because
we have to come save y'all.
We're going backwards in some instances. So I think we're at a different level to engage, and people are definitely more aware, more educated, and more interested in being involved.
So District 9, Jerry McNary, is it?
Yeah, McNerney, yeah. So this is, another seat that, I don't live in this district, so I don't know as much about. But what I do know about him is that he has a PhD in mathematics. He is a scientist, and that is a really...
She loves mathematics. As soon as you said mathematics, that's done. That's done. You got her vote. You got her
especially in an era where it feels like science doesn't matter, that we're not really, we're still having conversations about whether or not vaccines save more lives than they harm.
Exactly.
Whether or not we're having conversations about whether climate change is real. So like when we're having these basic conversations that let me know, wow, a lot of your biology and chemistry teachers just did not serve you well in high school.
Just talk about school.
Yes,
period.
in school in general, but especially our science education has got to do better. So he really has focused a lot on renewable energy and some of those environmental policies that we need somebody to go to, Congress and champion. Somebody who's not going to equivocate on things like whether or not science is real. And so that's an important position in general. One of the things that has always he's been in office for I think 11 or 12 years now, and he comes home on the weekends, which is crazy. But he really
doesn't live in Virginia,
nearby, right? Exactly. But he comes home because he wants to engage with his constituents, and I think that says a lot about an elected official who really prioritizes coming back to their district, hearing what people have to say, and really representing that well. And so he's done a lot of work in that area, and also trying to kind of think about what the next level of tech is going to be, and making it so that our policies at the federal level are not lagging behind where our technology has already gone. So I think sometimes when we elect people to office, they're not well-rounded in their expertise. They have something very particular that they can bring and they can champion, and that's an important thing to have as well. And I think for California to send a strong scientist to the House is important.
What else on there? So I didn't realize that Jerry Brown's terms, you told me his term is up.
Yeah.
So now we have people running for governor.
Yes.
So you all recommended, is it Delaney Easton?
Delaney Easton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, so I'll talk a little bit about that. So you've got obviously Delaney Easton, Gavin Newsom, Antonio Villaraigosa, John Chang running as kind of the main Democrats, right, running. What I was looking at, what I like about Delaney is that she is so progressive. She is so understanding and is not afraid to say, look, we need to end this unjust system that we have. This woman works with foster kids. She's a court-appointed special advocate, like boots to the ground, understands the needs of people in poverty, understands, and what I love is that she also is not the establishment candidate, which to me sometimes, even though it makes it harder, but it means you're less beholden to some of those special interests.
Right.
And you can say, this is what I believe, and she really talks about, she used to be, you asked me earlier when I came in about the superintendent of public instruction and what that is. She used to lead that department, right, CDE. And so when she talks about education, she really talks about like our budget and being statement of values and how we're preparing our children, and she connects all of that to poverty and where we are now. And she's just someone that I think that will not be afraid to speak truth to conventional beliefs and kind of turn some things around. Now, she is a bit more of a long shot because she's not an establishment candidate. Gavin Newsom is the other person, and we talk about him as the leader of the pack. He's also very progressive. But she's someone who, at least for this this round, I thought is good to highlight this woman who really speaks a lot of the things that I speak about in terms of social justice.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's really important that we do think about challenging, establishment candidates in particular. I mean, for all of Gavin's progressiveness, one of the things that he is deeply entrenched in the new marijuana business, which many, I think, of those of us who are social justice and public health advocates are concerned about turning into the next big soda, big tobacco, big whatever industry that stomps on little people and does not, provide and causes a lot of problems, and then doesn't also pay into the system appropriately to be able to address some of the problems that it's causing. So, there are considerations when you think about basically if this was the, when Coke first started and you were to hire somebody who was deeply invested in Coke, what then does, public health policy look
Yeah.
like when you have somebody who's deeply invested in that. His family also owns a winery, so the likelihood of ever raising the taxes on alcohol is probably slim to none. So just putting that out there, we have not raised the tax on alcohol since 1990.
Wow.
When we raised the taxes on cigarettes and all these other things since then. And so it's just a consideration in terms of, we have some budget deficits here. Alcohol is a huge industry in California. Obviously, the wine growers and the winery owners and beer distributors are not going to love raising taxes, but they haven't been raised since basically in almost 30 years. And so that's certainly something for us to consider as well in terms of the likelihood of that happening when you have somebody who's deeply invested in those issues.
Wow.
I know you're not gonna make us go through all of these, are you?
Yeah, we're gonna go right on.
Okay, then we gotta probably be faster.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Lieutenant Governor, you could just kind of just give me a few things so we can get to the real important ones.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna start pitting like who your recommendations are. That's why you see me type over here.
Okay.
So Lieutenant Governor, I want to mess this person's name up.
Yeah, Eleni Konalakis. It's Eleni. And she, Eleni is someone, she's actually comes from Sacramento area. She worked under the Obama administration as ambassador to Hungary, someone who's also very progressive, understands the child care issue as well, First Five Commission. If you look at her endorsements as well, lots of other progressive organizations. Now her opponent, Senator Ed Hernandez, has some endorsements, from some as less progressive groups as well, which led us to pause a little bit. But we think that Eleni will serve well. There's a caution that I did note there in terms of her business is in housing, very wealthy from that regard, and so some of the housing issues that we have in our states, I had a thought about how she would respond to some of those, and she talks about affordable housing and all of that, but just wonder if that comes to head with her own business life, if how that would relate, but.
So Secretary of State Alex Padilla.
Padilla.
Well, he's already an incumbent.
Yes, he's
right?
an incumbent.
So,
he's actually done some really good things while he's been in office, including, as I'm sure most of you who are watching are aware, we have now a month to be able to vote, and that rollout and that expanded voter registration and time to vote, and everybody getting an absentee ballot is largely under his leadership. So he's been really big about trying to expand access to voting, allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register.
I did some
so
pre-registration.
Already registered before they turn 18. And so, he wants us to oversee, same day registration and all of that. And so he's really been trying to expand access. And we know that expanding access benefits more lower income people, elderly people, etc., from being able to engage in the vote. And so it's good for our democracy. It's good for our engagement levels as well, that people don't have to have their entire lives together well in advance in order to be able to participate. I would love for us to be able to get to a place where we could vote electronically. I know that that's, and I don't mean just like going there and vote electronically. No, I mean like from our smartphones. I see no reason why we can't get there eventually. But that having been said, so he's really been trying to expand access, which is largely in his purview. And while we know that voting is lower in years where you have a primary and there's kind of off season voting and when there's not a president, we also know that Black women are one of the highest groups in terms of engagement in voting. We vote the most. So pat yourselves on the back about that. So, but we also want to continue to expand, and we advocate on behalf of other communities. And so while we mostly have our stuff together, we recognize that, there are a lot of other communities that are struggling in this way. And so we want to so this is important to us because you do right by us, you do right by everybody. So.
But I do feel what we should highlight the issue in regards to the postage. So where this new rollout with the voting, and I don't speak for me because I'm not as vested in it as much as I should be, but Sacramento this is a pilot in three different counties in California, and Sacramento was not given the postage to actually to send in their ballots via mail. Mm-hmm. And so there are centers all around the city. There will be, I think, about 100 polling places that you can take them to on June 5th. But we, as Black women, have brought up the fact that there is an issue for why we weren't given the same opportunity to just, put ours in the mail as well. and we're gonna actually see in this pilot how that actually pans out.
Right. Yeah, the postage is a big thing, and important for us to remember that you have to see things through the finish line in order for them to be.
It's something that we addressed with our board of supervisor, Cerna.
So this next set of areas here, or things that people are running for, you have controller, you have treasurer, you have the attorney general, and insurance commission.
Right.
Why did you endorse these people? You could just go around. Somebody could take controller. Somebody
Fine,
could take.
I'll be quick. Betty as controller, you know, we have on there, the controller is the person who's like our state accountant, right? We have all this money, she's keeping track of it, right? Really skilled at this. She worked in the state legislature doing this, but she's also, what I love about her is she brings a social justice lens to the office as well. When the Trump tax cuts came out, or tax plan, she talks about how this is exacerbating pervasive inequality. And so here's someone who can be in a really boring office, but then also want to talk about social justice and how that relates as well. So she gets it, and she's good at her job and brings a social justice lens.
Bam.
So this one is just, you know, when we
Where
get to
we
the
at with
treasurer
one?
now,
Yep.
this one is really important because obviously somebody overseeing our money. What I really like is that Vivek has a very specific platform. It's not very often that you get politicians who will lay out exactly what they're going to do and not speak in platitudes and vagaries. Fiona also has similar values, but her platform was just not as specific as Vivek's. I don't know if anybody's platform is ever going to be as specific as Vivek's, but he laid out the 10 things he wants to do while he's in office. You can either agree or disagree with them, and I think that's really important to be able to have something to hold people accountable to.
You can do one.
Sure. Okay. Dave Jones, God, long record here in the Sacramento area, but as the Attorney General is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, and so again, you want someone who is going to take this role in terms of looking at it through a social justice lens and trying to right some inequalities as well. So even in his former job as a current job, but he's almost ending as an insurance commissioner, he's even talked about, he had a hearing on ending the cash bill system. He's going after unscrupulous, bill bondsmen, and so even in that purview, he's really been a man of social justice. And I would say, even as an insurance commissioner, he's one of his things that he really tried to do is also get minority women in places of power in boards and commissions. He literally had one of his staffers working on that.
Wow.
So insurance commissioner, we have Asif Mahmood. So we talked about money in campaigning. He has taken a vow not to take any money from pharmaceutical companies or insurance companies. Again, this is really important for somebody as insurance commissioner not to take a stance and say, I'm not going to accept those funds, because it means that there's not that sway that's happening there from the industry, and he can actually think about what the people. And he actually said, those businesses are not my constituents, you are. And I think that's a really important stance to be able to take. He also has laid out very specific things that he wants to do, including increasing mental health practitioners. He's really a champion for healthcare for all, for Medicare for all. And so he wants to kind of, keep pace with the changes that are happening over time. And so we think that's a solid recommendation. Senator Lara, however, was a late add to this race. So was not included in your official vote or your official voter guide that you got, in the mail. What I will say is that Senator Lara has been a very, very strong champion of a lot of progressive issues in the California Senate, and so that's not a bad vote at all.
He was like the forefront
he was like
of that.
At the forefront, I mean,
rights for undocumented, like he's just on it.
He's really, he's one of the offices that if you are having a hard day and things aren't going well, you go into his office to talk to his staff just to be reminded that there's good in the world.
They woke. He woke.
But not everybody hates you, and not everybody is a terrible cynic. So with that having been said, I think in that case there are, I think Asif has been out there and has done a really great job of establishing his candidacy, but you kind of can't go wrong with either of them.
Okay, so we're going to jump on down to the Superintendent of Public Instructions.
All right, Mr.
Who wants to take that? Why was he endorsed?
Actually,
I'm not endorsed.
recommended.
So we recommended Tony Thurmond because he kind of has a platform that talks about kind of moving public education into the 21st century.
What is his current position?
He's currently in the assembly.
Yes.
And one of the things that we think is really important about this is making sure that one of the big things that stood out to me is, leading the fight against Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos to privatize our public education system. And that's a big push because a lot of the work that's going to have to be done in this position is going to be around trying to figure out how California is going to circumvent the tide that is being moved in that direction. Mm-hmm. So if that's important to you, that we have public education and that we don't entirely privatize that, then that's certainly a reason to vote for him. He's also, championing STEM, which again, I love science, so obviously that's really important. And then also creating inclusive education environments, trying to address bullying, trying to address childhood trauma, trying to address LGBTQ students, and students of color, foster youth. So he's really tried to create this kind of inclusive platform, and so we think that would be a good recommendation.
Okay. California State Senator, 4th term, 4th district.
What can we say about Nielsen? So, Phil Kim this is a kind of a long, again, I would say it's a longer shot candidate, but he's someone who, again, espouses those really progressive values that we really think needs to be, the people that needs to be in office, right? We have in there, how about he supports efforts to end mass incarceration and fix our racist criminal justice system. Very different from the current person who sits there. So,
okay. District 6.
You know, Dr.
Yeah.
Pan.
I know, but WAPA endorsed him.
Absolutely.
As well as the guy recommending him. Why?
Right, and so, if you look at Dr. Pan's record, he's, again, someone who gets healthcare, which is such a big issue that we're facing right now, and also some of the inequalities in healthcare, right? The need for equity in healthcare, and really trying to address some of those issues. As a former lobbyist, one of the things that I used to do was actually talk to him about trying to figure out, we know African Americans, Native Americans, in terms of how we have a high blood pressure, and trying to address some of those issues, and he's someone who champions those things. We talk about, he gets science, right? The whole vaccine thing, so he's someone who championed that, and he's out in the community as well. Just yesterday he had an event at the Capitol around getting kids healthy meals, right? And making sure that when they're in areas in the summer that they're getting meals and learning how to read, and they don't have that summer slump. And so he's just, someone who gets it.
Okay, District 8 recommendation. Tom Pratt.
Yeah. So his priorities kind of fall into a few categories. He's really interested in economic security, in having a healthy environment, also in community safety, which often is not, when people use community safety, they often don't mean public safety, right. Which is a very different thing, which does not necessarily mean policing. He's also focused on equity in education, and so there are certain words that, when we hear them in someone's platform, we recognize that they're bringing a different lens to that work. He's really interested in well-paying jobs, which we know is, again, important, especially when we're thinking about a Black woman's perspective. And he also has been a really big champion on clean and reliable water and affordable water, which is one of the crises. California does have the right to clean drinking water. We affirmed that in 2012, but we still have lots of communities that don't have access to clean water. So this is an important issue that we have to focus on. He's also a champion of affordable health care and affordable housing. And so those are all issues that we know really affect Black women. And so that's one of the reasons why he got those are many of the reasons why he got our recommendation.
Next one, member of the California State Assembly. This is a two-year term, District 6, Senator Jackie Smith. You guys recommended her. Is her recommendation?
Yes. Kevin Kiley, right?
Yes. So Jackie Smith, has really been focusing on the increasing cost of housing. And so, she was saying, is basically saying like, the cost to buy a home is $426,000. The median rent is somewhere around $1,300. It's a lot right now. And the really important thing is that wages have not increased. And so, her opponent has voted to, against a lot of the things that would try to help that. And so that's part of the reason why we think that coming in and kind of recognizing where we are on this is really important. again, another person who champions affordable health care, which is important because we need to have the political will to be able to move that forward.
Right.
We want to fight another fight. We don't want to be fighting about affordable health care for the next, 100 years.
And we know on a national level, we are in a fight with that.
Exactly. And then, and so, just in thinking about the overall candidacy, this is a candidate who really kind of supports a lot of the things that we think are important, and the opponent just does not. So this is one of those clear cases where it's like, there is clearly an option that's not in our best interest here, and you should not vote for that option. You should vote for Jackie Smith.
Okay, District 7, Kevin McCarthy.
I think we all like him.
Yeah.
Like, hands down. Like,
I was like, Kevin gets it right. Kevin McCarthy is actually the only one of my representatives who has not endorsed the current DA.
Yep.
So shout out to Kevin McCarthy
early
for that.
childhood education. He also did the new bill with Weber.
AB
Yeah, 937. Oh, was it 931?
931, yeah.
931. Say what it's about again.
This is use of lethal force.
Mm-hmm.
Really being able to examine that as well, and so,
he's one of our champions, and he's here local. His staff is also great. We'll give a shout out to Ashley. She's awesome.
Yes.
So
Ashley, member of the Sacramento Sister Circle.
There's Vanessa in here. She said, was it Nelson Flo was previously talking about?
Kevin Kiley.
Kylie.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Nielsen is the one that was Philip Kim.
Yeah.
Okay. So, wow. So the last one, are we at District 8? Kevin Cooley.
Yes.
Ken Cooley.
Kim Cooley, sorry.
Yes. This is another incumbent, and there are, the regulation of medical marijuana was important. California was one of the early states that tried to do this, recognizing that we needed additional regulation, especially if we were going to try to do adult use, and he was kind of a leader on that. He's also been pretty good about, several things that we care about in terms of looking at, overseeing the policy committees to create greater governmental transparency in state agency operations. That's important because there's a lot of money that should be spent in our communities that's not, or doesn't go where people said it was going to be. And it can't only be the Republicans who kind of come out and are like, rah, rah, we care about accountability. We need to make sure that the money is being spent appropriately. And so that's really important as well. He's also the chair of the Select Committee on Foster Care. And so he's really kind of increased the visibility for the needs of our most vulnerable children, those who are in foster care placements.
Yep.
Okay, District 9. Now, this is a little different. Explain your recommendation.
Don't even mention his name.
We do not.
That's why I'm listening.
We throwing the most epic of shade, make no recommendation for any candidate that is on the ballot in District 9. That having been said, we have a very strong recommendation for a write-in candidate, and that is none other than the incomparable Alana Matthews. We do that because we don't feel like there's anybody who's on the ballot who actually champions the issues of Black women, and we think that actually by endorsing any of the people, we're actually doing more harm than we would be doing good to our community. We have an incumbent who has been, really terrible for the community in terms of being anti-Prop 47, being anti-Prop 57, wanting more people to be locked up, not being very pro-incarceration. It sometimes feels like, the policies that this person champions are like 1994 crime bill, like the last 24 years haven't happened. And so it is unfortunate to have someone, but we have a saying in our community that all skin folk in can
Hello.
And so just because this person might share hair care products or the need for sunscreen with you does not necessarily make them an ally. And so we feel very strongly that
one thing you learned today is that
skin folks is not
skin folks.
That's real talk.
So we are asking you to, think about writing Alana Matthews. Get used to seeing that name associated with District 9, and we hope you can continue to see that name associated with District 9. So start practicing that.
And we need Oh Boy out, period.
Yes.
Point blank. We need him very much out of this seat.
Yes.
Okay, so statewide propositions. Okay, 68, parks, environment, and water bond.
Yes.
Right. So we obviously voted in recommendation yes on that. Flo talked earlier about the environment, right? And maybe some things we don't always think at the forefront, but where we live matters. And if you live in areas that have, parks, walkable areas, what does that also do for your health? What does that do for the standard and quality of living? And what we like about this bond is that it actually is going to dedicate 15 to 20% of the funds using communities that are under-resourced and low income as well. And so we want to make sure that, this money is going to go to what we call park poor neighborhoods, and that is what we need. Just because you live in the rich area don't mean that you get all the parks. There you go. That's it.
Okay, Prop 69.
There's also money in there for clean water as well.
Right,
So it's important. That's important as well. And we have a lot of schools throughout California that do not have clean drinking water. It's not just Flint. There are some schools right here yes, that have, when they look at little lead in the water, it's more than 15 parts per billion. It's going off, and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 1 part per billion. So 15 being the standard that sets off a whole bunch of triggers is 15 times higher than the pediatricians recommend in terms of a standard. And the bottled water standard is 5. So when you're at 15, it's a problem.
Right.
When you're exceeding 15, it's really a problem.
Wow. Prop 69.
So this one can be a little confusing, but basically it's saying that, the money, so we had SB1, which what some people call the gas tax, right? That was passed, had all this money. If you're driving down the freeway, you see your tax dollars at work, that's what's happening there with all of that. Basically, this proposition says that the money from the tax has to be spent on, the purposes that it was intended for. And if there's more money that is generated, it still has to be spent on the purposes that it was generated for. So, sounds fair enough.
Okay, so it's yes on that.
Yes
Prop
on that.
70.
Prop 70 is a no. So we have the cap and trade system, which basically it's kind of allows businesses. So if you are, without getting too much, but basically there's a fund that gets special money if you are exceeding certain pollution limits.
If you're a big polluter,
if you're a
you
big
get to
polluter,
pay
you get to
instead
pay.
of cleaning
Yes,
up your act.
basically. But
Which is what many of them do.
Right.
Exactly. And what this money does is, creates communities where you can bike and walk, and you can get, little bit discounts on, cars like hybrids and electric cars and all of that. But what this proposition is trying to say, which is why we said no, is that it's trying to say that this money has to be placed in a special fund until 2024, and then it has to have a 2/3 vote before you can spend it. And it is hard to get a 2/3 vote on anything.
The legislature does not agree, even in California.
Exactly.
2/3 of them are voting for anything.
So basically, they're trying to say that, you can't spend this money. And so that's why we said no, because we need this money spent in the way that it was intended.
Exactly.
Okay. Prop 71.
So this one basically was the effective date for ballot measures, and so this actually has no opposition at all because it's not a particularly controversial thing. But basically, it's just saying that proposition do not become law until 5 days after the Secretary of State has certified the results. The reason for that is that when you have, especially now that we're having more people vote by mail, and you can mail your ballot off until June 5th. Which means that it may not be received until June 8th.
Right.
And so in the event that happens, there can be a lot of ballots that still have not been, are not present and accounted for when we start saying, yay, this proposition passed.
And then
or,
you're like, oops,
right,
sorry,
like,
it didn't.
Sorry, it didn't. Actually, that's not what happened. And so if you have things go immediately
Just
into
kidding.
effect,
Right.
you can end up with problems of actually implementing something that hasn't actually been passed by the voters.
Right.
And so
This is
just
passed
ensures-
unanimously by the state legislature, which is something that
Again,
rarely
remember
ever
when
happens.
You said that never happens? It never happens. So that's how you know this is probably not a thing that when you don't have opposition and when the entire legislature can agree on it, that usually means it's probably a good idea.
Prop 72.
Yes, basically, if you own a house, you know that if you're adding, anything new to it in terms of new construction, you're subject to, possibly higher property tax, right? If your house gets reassessed. This basically says if you're adding something, what is called a rainwater capture system, right? So you're adding something where you can get water to be able to recycle it. Exactly. We're in a drought. We know that. And so if you add this new thing to your property, it's not considered new, so you don't have to pay extra property taxes on it. We vote yes so that people can be incentivized to engage in, conserving water and all that good stuff.
All right, now we get down to the nitty-gritty, some stuff that people really want to hear about.
Yes.
Okay, so the county electors, it's good to know that stuff, honestly, because people things get past us all the time because we
Right.
really don't know what is Prop 72. What is the,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, no, yeah, like it's tic-tac-toe game. Something's like, no,
The
you need to know
whole,
what
the
you're
whole
voting
thing.
on.
I think what's also important to note is that people, that the higher powers know when we don't vote. And so, as you can see, this is a very long ballot, a lot of different issues, and historically lower voter turnout. And so I just think,
And fewer people complete their ballot.
yes,
So people tend to know more about, because
The
they're going to be
very top
commercials
ones.
on TV about the governor and about
Right.
those kind of seats. And so people tend to start their ballot and then they get
It's a
voted
proposition
fatigue,
you're like, when you don't
and they're like,
understand.
screw it.
don't nobody, yeah. So I feel like this is one of the reasons why we went to this extent, because we know that people are not going to look up all this information. This is a lot of information,
I didn't
so
wanna
this is
look
very
up all this
helpful.
information.
We love you. Thank you.
right.
I was like, cool, then I didn't want
Thank
to
you,
look up all this information. So
Yeah.
it's a labor of
It
love.
was
Yes, it is a
I was like,
And we're so grateful that you
Yeah,
did that
yeah.
because we need to know
This
this
is what
information.
our seventh time
Yeah.
doing it.
I'm happy to join. I'm happy to join the
Yeah.
party. Thanks for inviting me to the party.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
that's
I
what's
wish you
up.
had joined the party in November of 2016. We had those 17 statewide ballot measures.
yeah,
That thing was crazy.
Yes.
So for
Alright.
the Sacramento County Board of Education, this is a 4-year term, Area 1, Bina
Lefkowitz.
You know her, right?
I know her.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
awesome.
Right. So, and
I'm
Bina's
supposed to act
been
like I'm
she
getting information.
yeah, she's running. So
No,
what,
you're not.
what I loved is that Bina she was running unopposed, but she still answered our questionnaire, came interviewed, and then after that came to one of our meetings after we'd already endorsed her to talk to everyone about these things. We actually during our meeting talked a lot about mental health and really trying to think about how we can address that. She gets it. Youth Development Network. She's someone who gets it, and that is really why we supported her.
So
Yeah.
Bawapa endorsed her and you guys recommended her, which is awesome.
Right.
And she's done a lot of great work around.
She's accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like I said, she's running unopposed, and Phil Kushner came to 2 meetings and just
That's
so.
what's up. Area 2, Ray Green, he'll be here tomorrow night talking to me. So
Right.
Martha, but Bawapa endorsed him and you all recommended him. Why?
Right.
Besides him being awesome.
Yeah, so the reason why I
Even though I want to know why he ain't coming out me.
the reason why I
He'll
endorse
be here tomorrow. Come
you
back.
can send him again, right?
Why ain't coming out me, right?
Ray, if you're watching, you'd like to know.
We need to let Dimitri out. That's his wife, right? We're like,
That's
Dimitri,
right.
get him
And
over
we
it.
ain't heard nothing from this thing.
But I will say this: the reason why we endorse Ray Green. If you look at his background as well, so he's a program director at the Roberts Family Development Center, running the Black Child Legacy Campaign as a program director. He's the guy working with kids. There was a story about the kid that was going to be shot or someone's going to school. He's the guy that's working with the kids, taking them out of the school, really understands. And he talks a lot about the school to prison pipeline, understands that, but he also sits on the board for the advisory committee for the LCAP, looking at how our funds are being spent, so understands those issues as well. So I love that he's just, and his personal story, someone who gets it, he's a foster kid, was going
He's
to.
former foster?
Mm-hmm, yeah, so his parents, he talks about it publicly, so I can say it.
Wow.
Wow.
Addicted
Okay,
to drugs.
maybe I won't bring it up
addicted to
again.
drugs. He got into a good family. I met his dad. His dad was taking him to community.
Christy's
His dad would take him to community meetings when he was young and just kind of, so he's someone who gets it and
He's humble
so
at the same time.
right.
He's not like, that's not his crybaby story. Not
No,
like
I didn't know that
Always
until
wanna
like
have that
Yeah, this is
That's what makes it so much more impressive. Like
Right.
that's not his trademark.
No, it's not.
His trademark is to get the work in and,
Right.
and
So
but that
that's-
makes sense to
right.
his humbleness. And,
Right. So
Wow.
that is why we endorse them.
Okay, all right now. Okay, district. Well,
You need to
Phil Sun is running on a poll, so it don't matter. District 2, Patrick Kennedy. He's in that company, right? District 2. Yeah.
We skipped
Well,
area
did I skip
3.
something?
Area 3.
Where did you see that at?
Rick Lonnie, right? So Rick Lonnie,
Area
is
3.
Area 3.
Oh, maybe I turned the page.
Yeah.
Okay, everything. Thank you.
Right. So Rick Lonnie, again, running for Sacramento County Office of Education. He's someone who was a former San Juan Unified School Board member. Led the board during tough budget times, but still kept them, solvent. He's someone who really understands education and looks at it also from, the progressive lens that we care about as well. if you're ever interested, he runs Inside California Education. This is a program on KVIE. And so, where he interviews lots of different stakeholders as well and talking about the complexities of our education system. So someone like that is very well poised to tackle some of the issues that we face.
Okay, let's see. The other Twin Rivers, the rest of them are unopposed except for
Which
Area
is important to point out because we put a little note at the beginning of the guide that says, in reviewing this guide, you will know that there are far too many people running unopposed.
Yes.
And so unless we are absolutely thrilled with the job that they are already doing, it really is important for us to consider throwing our names in the hat next time. So if you live in Twin Rivers areas 2 and 4, we currently have, unopposed candidates running, and you should really consider if you have ideas about, and experience and expertise in some of these areas. Don't hold back on the sidelines. Like, it's time
What schools are in
for
Twin
this.
Rivers, by the way?
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah, I was
There's-
gonna say part of the Sacramento schools are in there because I know
Right.
I'm pretty sure like Grant and a couple other ones are
Yeah,
not
Grant is
They're in Twin Rivers.
Grant is in Twin Rivers. Endercom isn't. Endercom is in the Thomas Unified School District.
Yeah,
But if you think of like Foothill, so like Foothill,
What
North
about
Highlands,
Highlands?
Highlands
Okay.
High definitely. So
Okay.
Foothill, North Highlands, all those are Twin Rivers.
Also, I think what's important to say too, in line with what you just said, Flo, is that there's one black elected official in the Sacramento County.
Black woman.
Black woman. Sorry.
Keep going
And who
up.
is that? Do we know her name?
She's on the CSUS board.
Lynn Palmer. No, am I saying it right? Oh, goodness.
I'm pretty sure
I'm
it's
picturing her right now.
Consumers.
Lynn, is it? I think it's Lynn. Oh my God,
Revis?
Lynn. No. I'm picturing her right now, and
I know we recommended her
literally
at some point.
escapes me right now. But Pam
Yes.
Haynes.
Yeah,
Pam
I was
Haynes.
gonna say.
I was like, it's
I
tip of my
was
tongue.
gonna say I could go back over our past
Right.
voter guides because we recommended her in
I'm
the
pretty
past.
sure it's Pam.
When she's
And that's
when she's
just
been up for election.
important to note because when you're not represented in these seats, then the issues that are specific to you and I they're not represented. Like we know that for a fact. Nobody can represent us better than we can.
Real talk. Okay, so what about Area 6?
Yeah, that's Rebecca
Rebecca
Sandoval. Also kind of that Garland, Northgate, Natomas type area. She's someone, Rebecca, if you ever meet her, she's a fighter. She's focused on equity and access issues, and she's someone who's not afraid to let you know what she believes and to go to battle for our kids.
Okay. County Board of Supervisors. District 2, Patrick Kennedy.
So again, District 1 and 5 are
Skip,
unopposed.
Phil Sterner.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, he's running
And
unopposed.
that's the challenge. is
Yeah.
that we really should not have board supervisor positions that are unopposed.
But we do see Phil Sterner as an ally. However,
Black
I
Child
think
Legacy, sure.
He also
it's
endorsed.
important to know that Black women are going to be meeting with him on a regular basis to talk about some of the needs and the issues in our communities on a monthly basis. And so we're going to hold him to that. And so that's something just to notate.
Yes. For District 2, we've recommended Patrick Kennedy. Patrick Kennedy is the incumbent, and this is one of those recommended with considerations because he endorsed the current DA,
That's a problem.
which is a problem. But and I don't say but. And the entire Board of Supervisors endorsed the current DA, which is a problem.
And most of the city council.
And I was like, and the entire city council did. One has rescinded that endorsement, but long after that endorsement. But
Nothing.
sidebar.
I forget.
So Patrick Kennedy also has really strong ties to the building trades that we brought up in the guide. And he played a role in championing those school closures that I know a lot of people are still really upset about. And these were problematic, these were traumatic, especially for students of color. So those are certainly big knocks on him. Unfortunately, and this is again, when we say run, we mean run a good campaign because he actually has an opponent who does not have a website.
We tried.
We tried to find more
I had to
information, but I
start-
can't in good faith recommend someone
Is this
who
who
I
reached
don't
out to
even.
us?
That's who
Yes.
reached.
Yeah, and so that
Wow.
they reached out to us and we're like,
I was
why
like, I can't find
are we
anything.
not recommended? And we're like, because the only information we had about
So
you
you
is when you ran
retired
for
DMV
office like
supervisor.
5 years ago. And that just can't work. So, you know, if you were going to manage to pay your filing fees, save an extra $15 and get a website. It's 2018. Like, people need to be able to figure out who you are, be able to share that on social media, be able to tell other people, go here and learn more, be able to go there to donate money to your campaign so you can keep paying the hosting fees. So, like, there's a whole way that this, like, reinforces itself. So, really, if you're running for office, like, basics, even if you're running for local office, you need a website.
Yeah, we require you, like, it's just not enough for you to be black anymore. I think we're starting to, you know, as we're,
what did we say before?
Right, that applies, but that can't be the reason why we vote for you, especially when we can't find any information, you don't have a track record, and we appreciate them reaching out to us, but let's talk before the election, and let's, you know, if you're interested in, you know, more ways that we can support you, then we can do that, but you gotta be more than black for us.
Right. So, to say the things that added us to the recommendations with considerations for Patrick Kennedy is that, you know, he has focused on transportation and homelessness issues. He was one of the people who helped craft the agreement between the city and the county for the Whole Person Care Project that's coming up, which is the wraparound services to be able to address some of the intractable homelessness issues in our community.
Which is big.
Yeah, that's big. And, you know, he was really the one who, much like Phil Cerner, kind of highlighted the, you know, for the Board of Supervisors, at least, he highlighted, you know, the disproportionate African-American child deaths. Patrick Kennedy was the one who kind of looked at the practice of patient dumping, where basically patients were released from the hospital and just kind of dumped into communities with no plans, and some of them had major medical conditions, right? And so he championed, so that was part of what led to the city county working together on the whole person care and trying to, you know, at least preliminarily come up with some ideas around homelessness. We think that there's a lot more that should be done, and
we're watching you.
And we really want, we really want to hold some folks. Hey, Pat. Hey, Patrick. But we think, you know, given what we have in terms of, you know, this being a contested seat, Patrick Kennedy was our recommendation.
All right, so District 5. This person's running unopposed, right?
Once again, run, girl, run.
Run. We working on her too, and her.
I mean, when I said run, girl, I was holding the mirror outwards and telling all of you to run so that I can continue to help write our lovely voter guide and tell everyone to vote.
We got a team.
I'll be okay.
We got ready money. Yes, we are ready. I was going to take my
for your term, assessor.
Okay, so we're
assessor.
So the assessor.
We're right over
I'm sorry.
Assessor. We're bringing it back. Yes, I did. So Kate Van Buren is, again, you know, going back to our values. She's someone who lines up in many ways. She really focuses on mental health and substance abuse issues, which, you know, is the other side of homelessness, right? So it's not just high costs. It's also, you know, it's a complex issue because it's not one thing that's driving it. And so when people come up with one solution, that's challenging. And so she has championed not only the development of affordable housing units and other things like that, but also how we address the homelessness from the mental health and substance use side of things as well. She is not originally from Sacramento, but since she's moved here, she's really been engaged, in particular in helping, you know, thinking about some of the economic issues that plague families. And so we think that's important as well. She supports Prop 13 protections for residential property owners. That can be important because that's part of, like, right now, the semi-affordability of California's housing is because we also don't have crazy property taxes like a place like New Jersey where you pay like $2,000 a month in property taxes. So Prop 13 has done that, and until we get the actual rates of housing down, as much as we need the additional property tax money, we can't afford to do anything that's going to further raise the rate. It's going to make it completely unaffordable in a place where our wages have not gone up very much. So totally understand that we need more Prop 13 money, but we can't do that until we actually fix the housing costs in the first place and set those appropriately. And she's also a big champion of county public transportation, which is really important, and I sit on the Active Transportation Commission. Yep. So definitely think that's an important.
And you're a candidate for the
for the regional transit. Yeah. So
Right.
yeah, we'll see.
The next big one in this election is district attorney. So 4-year term. WAPA endorsed Noah Phillips as well as recommended by the guide. Why?
Can we start with just, because I think we need to
Start
spend a little
however you
time on
like.
this. So I think the first thing we need to start with is that when you have a candidate or when you have somebody in office who's really bad, like a Trump, for example, there is going to be a tendency in 2020 and probably in 2024, I know some of y'all ain't ready to hear that yet, to have the conversation about his opponent and sort of deify them and make them seem like they are perfect and that they can do no wrong. And I think, we have to come to voting with both our ideals as well as our pragmatism, which is why we've made recommendations here that we strongly say are not endorsements, because we are not out here trying to get, specific people, give them the political capital to be able to say, they think I'm great. We're saying, like, look, if you're going to vote, this is how we think you should vote. And so I think that's important to state, because neither of these candidates are perfect. And let's be honest, neither of these candidates are members of our, community of Black people. They didn't grow up in our skin, and they are not particularly, like from even personal experience in terms of, growing up poor or growing up whatever. Like, they don't have that in common with us. So there is a disconnect in terms of experience that we just have to lay out there.
But let's also be honest. This district attorney seat, she's been in office for a very long time. She actually was endorsed by the other DA. What was it, Scully?
Jan Scully.
And she was there for a long time.
She's been it for 4 years.
This position is a key one that oftentimes the community doesn't get involved with. And let's just be honest, a lot of people are paying attention to this really critically because of what happened with Stephon Clark.
Right.
And so I think, rightfully so, local organizers targeted the DA and also the sheriff in regards to how that was done, and like some of the ways in which he has engaged and not engaged with the community. But this is a position that historically incarcerates Black youth, is very inherently involved in mass incarceration, and has been very
unjust in their practices of when you're looking at charges as well,
and disproportionate to Black folks,
right?
Where we talked about earlier with Dianne Feinstein has been very helpful in locking people up and throwing away the key. And so this is a really key position, and I think hopefully we'll be in a position in 4 years to be able to pick a candidate that will represent us differently. And the other part of
I'm looking at you, Black women
that's
attorneys.
So the pipeline, right? So that's
do I need to start calling out names? But I mean, the reason I started with not equivocation, but I wanted to level set when I started the comments, because there was an article in the Sacramento Bee this morning, top of the fold, talking about Noah Phillips and these emails and whatever else. Again, I'm not saying that he's perfect.
Wait, first of all, they all be taking money, okay? Let's just be clear. This is the most corrupt. This is the most corrupt seat ever, okay?
But this one
was his uncle.
Yeah, his uncle sent him a racist, sexist
all of
email.
The above emails.
Yes. And
his uncle said, I don't think this is work appropriate. And he responded saying, oh, totally work appropriate.
Right. And so I'm level setting.
Has he addressed this?
Yes, with trying to cover his tracks and instead of just being like, I was wrong. We need to that's something we need to teach in school, is how to say I was wrong, because people just don't know how to say
my bad. Get over it much quicker.
Yes, exactly. I didn't want to upset my uncle, so I just said something really stupid. It was.
It
totally
sounds
inappropriate.
like well, first of all, the other side has a lot of money, so I just think
and it's like when you go against your boss, they got access to your work email. To everybody, they got access to your work email.
If you're gonna run for office against your boss, make sure there's nothing in those work emails.
They gonna come for you.
Make sure
they got a special intern combing his emails.
Right. But to go into the endorsement part, though.
So here's the thing. The bottom line is that we've had Emory Schubert for the last 4 years and during her time in the office before then. And as DA, yes, she has done a few things that, especially around domestic violence and sex trafficking, that we think are good. I also think her partnership with Reading Partners is important, and she championed one of Kevin McCarthy's bills, who we like, when it was in the legislature. So that's great in terms of like trying to address some of the school to prison pipelines and invest in early education.
Even though when they get to her,
right. However, she also has been anti-Prop 47, anti-Prop 57. She's been pro-incarceration.
Anti-advance.
She's an anti-advance peace. And she's actually one of the people who has to work with the city council and the program to be able to help implement it. So it's not good to have somebody who had to be dragged on board. She refuses to meet with the community, which actually, among all the things that she's done,
she built a fence.
Yes, and she built a fence. And I think among all the things that she's done, her refusal to meet with the community and her not being community grounded is probably the biggest knock against her. I also question her ethics. She's friends with Scott Jones. There's no reason why she should have been the one deciding whether or not he was being pursued in terms of the concealed weapons process of giving out those permits, and he went from giving out 300 to 8,000. So I question some of the people who've said she's in favor of gun control. I don't think you endorse and support and don't even allow the investigation to occur of your friend who's given out 8,000 concealed weapons permits. His predecessor gave out 300. Like, that's ridiculous.
And she has gotten so many campaign contributions in the wake of the death of Stephon Clark.
So many.
In the room it says she needs to go.
Right.
Yes.
And then, quite frankly, I'm going to speak very candidly. I don't like the way she's been dog whistling white supremacy and running around town telling everybody that there are security threats against her and she's afraid. And I'm like, well, then why haven't you filed a police report? You are the head of, you're the district attorney.
You got connections.
If somebody actually has made a credible threat on your life and you haven't filed a police report,
she already doing the YTS.
Right?
Yes.
Like, you don't know how to file a police report. You're the DA, though. You're afraid.
DA, Becky.
You're right.
You won't make her start crying. You better stop because she's still feeling threatened right now.
So that,
where's the barbecue lady?
Those things are particularly concerning, given the role that she plays, and just the fact that she is strongly in favor of locking people up. She's not in favor of restorative justice. She's not in favor of alternative drug courts, so that we're not locking people up for a public health issue. And that stance has been there for a long time. And and we saw what happened with the war on drugs in terms of locking people up, and it did not make an impact on
still dealing with that today.
Right. So she's regressive on all the things that really matter to our community, and she has to go. Bottom line.
And I think we need to just make a point, though. Like, we need to be able to make this stance, right? And for them to go. Like, we need to put her out of office. Right. He might not be the best candidate, but I will say that he has been.
There's bad and better.
But he's been very much at the forefront of meeting with us.
Absolutely.
He's also been reaching out.
Right.
So he's been very open.
We're
gonna hold his ass accountable. Sorry for my French, but we're gonna hold him accountable in a way. But we're also thinking about this seat in 4 years. So she got to go, right?
And he might have to go in 4 years.
And he might have to go as well.
But we're gonna give him a chance because right now his talking points are on point.
Right.
And
he's listening, he's
engaging, and he said hold him accountable. So we
gonna hold him accountable.
We gonna hold him.
If I hadn't been late, I would have said this in the very beginning. I view voting as choosing your adversary for the duration of their term. So this is the person who you want to go and fight with. And so you want to have more substantive fights and fewer ridiculous fights with this person. So you're not choosing the person who you want to marry, who you want to make babies with, who you want to own a home with, who you want to spend your nights and weekends with. These aren't your homies. These are the people who you want to fight with for the next however long.
And if we're able to do this, we are going to be making a very big stance as a community. Like, we're going to be able to, like,
this is a big,
this is a huge,
like, if we're able to
Black
do
folks
this,
out, this would send shockwaves.
Right. This is being watched. I mean, this is like,
this is on a national level. So if we're able to do this, this changes the game.
So bottom line, talking points are on point. We're gonna give him a chance because we know the alternative is terrible.
And we got him about it.
So in the words of our generation, I'm gonna need us to do better. Let's vote for better, not worse.
Right.
So how does the sheriff thing work? Now we got sheriff. That's another 4 years.
Oh yeah, that's another one.
Yeah.
So what's going on with the sheriff?
Yeah. So this is a challenging race as well.
So Scott Jones hasn't been a friend, right? We talked about the concealed weapons handing those out like they're candy. We talk about transparency within the sheriff department. We talk about body cams. He doesn't want those. We talk about a lot of the things in terms of the culture of the sheriff department as well. And he's not somebody who fights for us or cares about us for that matter at all. He doesn't care about us, and he's been very serious about that. And he has.
He attacks local organizers.
Right, like he went after Tanya. Yes, he did.
He went after Tanya when Tanya wasn't the one who wrote the letter, and everything about Black Lives Matter and their demands at that point were totally.
And he was done with this seat. Okay, he had his hand-picked person to go, and then his hand-picked person was like, "Oh, I can't do it," so he was like, "Okay, well, I'm coming back."
Yeah.
Like, this isn't just. You don't get to just do that. You don't get to just be like, "Oh, this is mine."
He also was at a community event, and when somebody brought up, the need for mental health services, his response was, "Well, we have those in the jail, so we should lock people up so they can get access to mental health services."
Wow.
Right.
Like that's not the way.
Doesn't in terms of like protecting undocumented immigrants, like he just doesn't.
He got to go.
He's been flying to DC and has actively worked with Trump around this.
Right.
So it's not a good look. I sit on the Sheriff's Outreach Community Advisory Board, and have been pushing him, especially on the concealed weapons part. I have been pushing him on the marijuana enforcement, which he says that they're not going to be doing. So if any of you out there see marijuana enforcements by the sheriff, you got DUIs, you let me know. And even the transparency part around sharing the body cams, sharing the information. Like, why don't you have more transparency if you're actually trying to build trust within a community? Yeah. And there's not really a good talking point for that.
He gotta go.
Right.
He needs to go.
Right. So, and Milo's someone who's kind of talked about some of the things that we also care about, talking about bringing that transparency towards it, having them wear body cameras, and really changing that culture that we have within the sheriff's department. He understands the social justice implications of his position as well, and so for those reasons, we thought that
he supports bail reform.
Exactly.
He has definitely been on board with the implicit bias training.
Right.
And, he's also spoken out about the fact that the Sheriff's Department has paid out $10 million in suits around sexual harassment.
That culture.
So, with the Me Too movement, like, we need to get, Sacramento's own Harvey Weinsteins and the people who are creating that Weinstein-esque culture out.
Okay.
I just think he's not, I don't think, we would like a better candidate to choose, but he is what we have. And again, we need to make a strategic decision about this. And it's time for Oboy to go.
Your adversary.
Okay, City of Sacramento City Council, 4-year term, District 1.
Right. So, so Angelique Ashby is someone that, that we endorsed. She's been on the council for a long time. She's the only woman on the council. There's some things that we don't always agree with her on, and we'll be, very, very honest with that. But as we talk about, she's someone who really focuses again on the budget, looking at how we can use our funding more efficiently. There's a lot of work that we need to do with Angelique, but the reason why we did endorse her is that she's willing to continue that conversation with her to be a bit more progressive. She's, kind of sided a lot on the side with, public safety, talks a lot about those issues. But she also gets some of the social justice elements that we think we can push her on as well.
So on this one, you have an alternative recommendation.
Yes, because one of the issues is Angelique, along with the rest of her city council comrades, with the exception of Alan Warren, who's rescinded his endorsement, have all endorsed the DA. But Angelique also is problematic when we think about public safety because she has taken a ton of money from law enforcement. And if you look at her social media, she is Snapchatting filters up galore with police. And so we're really concerned about that. And we think that actually could be influencing her decisions on things like advanced peace, which she and the DA together had to be dragged kicking and screaming to support. And so I am really concerned about that. And so if she's reelected, we will definitely have to work with her to ensure that she adequately represents our values, because that, sort of unbridled support for law enforcement is not going to cut it when there needs to be some accountability. That's the wrong side of this equation to be on. So we do have an alternate recommendation, and that's Gabrielle Garcia. She's an activist. She's the owner of Blue Lamp, which, if you're in the Sacramento community, you know has hosted a lot of really progressive events, including fundraisers for organizations like Black Lives Matter. It's one of the few places in Sacramento where you can go and hear rap music, and that's an intentional and very political decision. She has committed to addressing some of the issues that Angelique has not, including police brutality, homelessness, rent control, and racial inequality, which we think calling out racial inequality is something everybody wants to talk about. Diversity, everyone wants to talk in these vagaries, but she actually is calling out racial inequality, and so we think that's important. And so for that reason, we think again, an outsider, much like some of the other candidates that we have recommended, and we think having somebody who doesn't come from that same pedigree and doesn't encourage the groupthink and is representing our values is a good alternative for those of you who live in District 1.
And this was also a recommendation from somebody that was a member of the Sacramento Sister Circle,
right.
That went in explicit about why we should think about this as an alternative recommendation. So we added this recommendation.
It's a living document.
Right. We added this recommendation a lot later, but definitely this is a position I think
Tanya?
that it was Tanya.
Yeah, that was Tanya. So thank you, Tanya.
We listen.
We listen.
But this is also a seat
document.
I think we also need to just pay attention to.
Yes.
So District 3.
Because Angelique has run unopposed in the past as well. And so, again, if you live in Natomas,
Lots of people do.
Think about running.
Lots of people do.
Cooler.
I don't.
that's right, she doesn't live. She doesn't, yeah.
You know what?
We'll talk about Coolest living situation on another
She's
episode.
mad because I don't live in the city. Okay?
Yeah.
You know what? It's not just city focused, okay? It's the county.
So
We'll
District
talk
3,
about
Jeff Harris is running unopposed.
Yes.
Right.
So make sure you say that.
So again, if you live in District 3, go ahead and give it a go.
Brings us to District 5 and your recommendations.
Right. So obviously, we recommended Tamika Lecluse. She is running against Jay Chenier, and Jay's been around for a long time. He's done a lot of good stuff. We actually had a lot of robust discussion actually within BWAPA, talking about this endorsement. Because a lot of people are familiar with Jay's work and what he's done. But at the same time, we talked about Tamika and her vision. And she talked a lot about the division in that district in terms of specifically talking about housing and, where the investments are and where they're not, and those people who are left behind. And that's something that I think a lot of times you ask people, what is the Sacramento issue? And you talk about housing. Mm-hmm. And as Oak Park develops, what's happening with people who are being pushed out as well. And that's something that Tamika understands very well and really talks about, wants to push. And, as we note in here, sheds light on the systemic disinvestment and land use policies that are taking place. So that being such a huge issue for Sacramento, is something that she's really been championing. And it goes to the fact as well, someone who understands the area and is a Black woman running for this seat. So, but like I said, it was something that we talked a lot about because people are familiar with Jay Chenier's work. But ultimately, we decided on Tamika because we think that she brings a stronger lens in terms of some of these really important issues around housing that are taking place specifically in that district, but also in Sacramento.
District 7. Your endorsement for BWAPA and also recommendations for the guide.
Yes.
Again, this was one also that was a lot of discussion in our meeting. It was a lot. For similar reasons, Rick, folks thought maybe, having a new voice, right? But then there were folks who were also familiar with what Rick has done in terms of, Centers for Fathers and Families and that long-standing community presence as well. But then some folks thought, has he really been there? Is he really fighting, right? And so we had that discussion, but ultimately landed on endorsing him, because of that record that he's had in terms of, the Centers for Fathers and Families and really focusing on how we can do better for our community. That's where we ultimately landed.
And we do, we want to, again, acknowledge that, all of the city council members have endorsed the current DA, a decision that we think is really regrettable. In the interest of full disclosure, I do have a personal relationship with Rick Jennings. And so I did have a conversation with him long before the Stephon Clark incident occurred, where he was murdered by police. And I asked him about that endorsement, and, it has not changed to this day, something that I will, be very candid about. I'm very disappointed in. In addition to that, I do feel like Rick's brand is being nice, and that can certainly be refreshing in the era of Trump, where we are seeing people just lacking in decorum, and certainly know that is important. But the downside of that is that it can sometimes lead to socially motivated deviations from your platform, and I think the endorsement of the DA is one of them. And there have been times where he hasn't taken stances on things that I think he really does champion and believe in, and he hasn't taken public stances, and I think part of that is also the brand of being nice. So I think if reelected, we need to be candid about the fact that we need to push him to be a stronger leader on these things vocally, and not so much of this, well, if I can get something behind closed doors, is that okay? Fine, sure, that's part of the process. But then there also needs to be some in front of closed doors acknowledgement of what was going on, and that wheeling and dealing can't always stay behind closed doors. And I feel like there hasn't been enough transparency about that. And so I'm just calling it out because I know people know that, I am good friends with that family, and I want to just make it very clear that accountability doesn't stop just because we're friends.
Right.
And I just want to say, we love them as a couple. They both, we also know Cassandra Jennings,
very well.
She's the president of
I was at their house.
But that's not the point, though. I think we're getting away from this really being passive and thinking that those that look like us represent us. And also, he's been in position for a good time now, and not only in this position, but in other leadership positions. And so it's actually now it's time to either put up or shut up, really. And so I think we're also looking at this as an important position. I mean, we had 4 black men on the city council. Three? No,
we have
3 now.
Well, Mayor.
Yes.
The mayor Johnson was considered one too, right? On the council. And we didn't necessarily see much, happen and change. And so I just think we need to be honest about the fact that we can still love and care about these folks, but are they the best people to represent us? Right. And so we have to just continue to ask ourselves that question.
And we just recently, Ballot, Sacramento sent, joining with the calls for, folks to council members to rescind their endorsement of DA Schubert, all sent, personal letters to all those members and those we endorse as well. Basically requesting that rescinding happen and they follow suit with what Alan Warren did.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people are saying, or a lot of people's talking point has been, do these endorsements matter? I wish I had brought it with me, because I'm sure many of you got the mailer this week that Anne-Marie Schubert has their names plastered all over it. It's the face of the mayor, and it's endorsed by Sacramento's mayor because he has a high favorability rate, right? And so for the people who aren't researching and aren't going to do their due diligence, because she doesn't have to list her, affiliation, people don't know she's a Republican. People don't know her record. People don't know the things that she stands for, and people don't know how problematic she's been. And so she's using their names all over. It's City Council, Board of Supervisors, the mayor, here's your face, here's your name. And so, yes, there is a chance that she may be reelected, and their endorsement is helping that. That's part of her campaign. And so you don't get to go around and say this is inevitable and then also, push with the trade wind. That's you're helping it happen, right?
So I know this guide is just for Sacramento, but as it pertains to Elk Grove, do I have any recommendations for any?
Well, Elk Grove is part of the county, so the sheriff is on there, the DA is on there,
and all the other and some of the state positions like District 9 and this kind of stuff.
Is the mayor thing on business one for Elk Grove?
That's in November.
Yes, so that'll be
so, and the other thing is, I just want to put a call out that this guide is largely done by volunteers. And we really welcome additional help, especially for those of you who live outside of our areas. There's we have full-time jobs and personal lives and need sleep and food and exercise as well.
She married, I'm trying to date people,
All right, we just out here
do all the other stuff.
Right. And even though
I think we should
great
talk about how we can open up this process.
Right.
I mean, I know Alana weighed in on maybe 1 or 2 things, but we would definitely like a committee of women to really participate.
That would be awesome. That would make it even more robust.
We will definitely talk about that.
And especially if you live in Elk Grove, if you live in Citrus Heights, if you live in Roseville, if you live wherever Jarita lives, somewhere way out in the cut, if you live way out where Kula lives, tell us what's going on in terms of your local city politics as well, because we would love to have that in the guide. The more we have in here, the broader the reach it is in terms of being able to help people complete their entire ballot. And we know those local seats matter as much as the ones at the top. Mm-hmm. So while I know people throughout the state have been grabbing this because they're like, oh great, you got me through the first half of my ballot. Right. It'd be great, to be able to, at least for the Sacramento region, fill it out even farther.
And there are other websites. I always use the League of
Women Voters.
League of Women Voters. There are other guides that can help with some of the local stuff as well. So, just because we put this out does not mean that this should be your end all be all, right? But it definitely is a resource, and we hope that people use it.
And I think for a lot of people it's a start, because I know for me, you want to know us as Black women, how do we feel about stuff? Mm-hmm. If we share, the same, for those who share the same views, this is very helpful. So. Thank you, ladies. Next Wednesday, I'll be back with 3 more people.
Yes.
Discussing this guide.
Thank you for having us.
We're not going to do this guide over again, are we?
No, but we're gonna hammer in on some of it, though, because with us, you need repetition. Yes. Everybody's not... We obviously know that Black folks, a lot of us don't always get it the first time. Somebody else... I may not do it the same way, but I feel like it's good for us to go over the guide, because one of the things we got to do is kind of we got to invest in things we say we want changes in.
Yeah.
Can't always be a cheat sheet.
I do think that there's a greater conversation about voting and why it's important for us to vote and why we need to participate as Black women. And yes, we probably have the highest count here, even in Sacramento, right? But I don't think it's enough for us just to vote, and I think this is the time.
I think the accountability is important, and I actually think a lot of what I've been kind of thinking about lately is how can we leverage our existing infrastructure to be able to provide oversight and implementation, in between things. And so, so I like to tell people that I, will sometimes sit in on city council meetings when I have free Tuesdays, and and I say I do it in my Batman-esque sort of spirit of loiter and intimidate, like the Batmobile does. Right. I don't always say something, but I'm there to remind you that I'm watching, and I'm there to pay attention to what's happening. And I really do feel like one of the things we can do is kind of be strategic about splitting up folks.
Core. You
go to county supervisor, you go to this, you go to a couple of city council. You can't do this week, I'll do that week.
We literally have a list, a Google Doc.
You check in on these offices, and then we have a central place where we can update it. And also, the next step will be learning about the budget. So that was actually that's a learning process for me. I know much more about the state budget than I do the city budget, and so I went and sat in partly because I wanted to learn what is our budget, how much are we spending on police and fire,
how much money are we sending back,
how much money is coming in from from these different revenue sources, what does it look like when we adjust. And so I think as we move over the next couple of years, building out some tools for us to be able to easily keep sight of what's happening on an ongoing basis will make it so that not that the guide won't be necessary, but you will be getting little pieces of this guide, so when it comes time to vote, you already know the incumbent, and so you're just introducing the people who want to run.
So maybe for next week, Kelly will be here, maybe we should be looking at the next steps after you vote.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yeah,
so
what's the next step?
You voted, ... now what?
I think that's the part where I think some of us have savior complexes. Just move on for versus everything's done now. It's no.
But then how do we spread the work? Flo brought up a really good point, because it's kind of like it's a lot. So how do we spread that? So
this is happening again in November.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have.
But I think this is awesome. I think that this is just. This helped me out, because some of the stuff I really didn't know. Honestly, I'll be in the booth like, that sounds interesting. But I even think no, you're not supposed to.
You know how this started was that there were questions. I can't remember. I don't remember. I posted a question or somebody else did, but in the Sister Circle page about this was like 6 years ago or so. Yeah. There were. I'm always a fan of give the Native American people whatever they ask for, because we all shouldn't be here. Right. Obviously we didn't come intentionally, but nonetheless.
Looking for the American dream.
But nonetheless, I say give them what they want. But there was a proposition on there where there were some tribes that were in favor and some tribes that were opposed. And so now I'm like, hold on a second, y'all got to tell me what you want so I can go and support the fam. You know what I'm saying? So I went. I think it was me, because I had this issue.
Yes.
And I went on my page and I was like, hey, you know, and I went in the sister circle and I was like, hey, and then there's this great conversation that came up about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the comments, people started saying, well, what y'all got on Prop 52? What somebody
What
got
you
on
gonna do
Prop
about this
51?
one?
What
It's
y'all
like the
gonna do
neighborhood
about
guy.
it? And so we started
Yeah.
putting that together and we thought, oh, this is something like we want to talk about this. We also want there to be a rationale. And so that's kind of how the guide came about. Was it started as a Facebook post about, I'm not sure how to do this one. And then
And it was much easier to do because it's like you could go to that post and
Right.
get the
Right.
page, but
Right.
now
Now
we're
it's
gonna
right
have
there.
to revisit
Yes.
how we
Yes.
think about November.
So, ladies, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for
talking
having
to me
us.
about
Thank
your
you.
recommendations
Yeah.
and the endorsements from WAPA. Tomorrow we're going to have Ray coming in to talk about his candidacy. And then also Gary Simon's going to come in and talk about Juneteenth because, you know, that's coming up too.
All right.
So, yeah. So, thank you all. Share this video with your family, with your friends, just in case. And then also I put the links on there. You can go to the guide yourself, y'all. We got to work these tools that people are developing and for free. I mean, come on, y'all.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. See you tomorrow evening. Peace.
All right. Peace. Dennis had his back.
That's so awesome.
Uh-oh.
Oh my God, that was 2 hours.